In the distant future, the universe was a vast and untamed wilderness, filled with mysterious worlds, ancient beings, and forgotten artifacts. On one such world, far from Earth, lay the ruins of an ancient civilization known as the Eldari, a race of beings whose power surpassed even the greatest of modern empires. In the heart of their desolate city stood a relic, a sword embedded deeply into an ancient stone pedestal. This sword, known as the Blade of the Eldari, was said to hold the key to unimaginable power. But it was also a test, an impossible challenge for any who dared to claim it. For centuries, the sword had been left undisturbed, its existence only a whisper among the stars. The Eldari were long gone, their empire fallen into dust, their secrets hidden within the ruins of their grand cities. However, as time passed, one name emerged again and again among the explorers of the galaxy, the name of Kiera, the last surviving member of the Eldari race. She was a being of great beauty and power, immortal in her own right, a living reminder of the legacy of her people. And it was her legend that brought a young human, a former soldier named Elias, to this forsaken planet. Elias was no ordinary human. Having seen the worst of humanity in the wars fought across the galaxy, he was both resilient and fearless. He had heard the tales of Kiera and the Blade of the Eldari, of the challenge it posed, and of the immense power it could bestow upon anyone worthy enough to wield it. Though most had dismissed the stories as myths, Elias knew better. His journey had been one of hardship and sacrifice, and he was determined to prove that he could succeed where others had failed. Kiera, however, was not so easily impressed. When Elias first encountered her in the ruins, she was seated upon a throne of stone, her long silver hair flowing around her like an ethereal cloak. Her eyes glowed with an ancient, piercing light as she regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Elias had expected a challenge, but he had not anticipated the presence of the being before him. The last of the Eldari, her beauty radiating like the stars themselves, yet her power seemed to fill the air, making the very ground tremble beneath his feet. "So, you've come to try your luck with the sword, humans?" Kiera's voice was soft, yet held a sharpness that cut through the silence of the ruins. She leaned forward, her gaze never leaving him, a slight smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Elias, undeterred, nodded. "I have, and I intend to succeed." Kiera's laugh was melodic, yet filled with an unmistakable edge. "You intend to succeed?" she repeated, amusement dancing in her eyes. "The Blade of the Eldari has claimed the lives of countless warriors, some stronger than you, some braver than you. What makes you think you are any different?" Elias did not flinch under her gaze. "I am different," he replied firmly. "I've faced impossible odds before. I've seen entire armies fall, yet I stand. If the blade can be drawn, I will draw it." Kiera's smile widened, her sharp teeth catching the light. She stood from her throne, walking toward the pedestal with grace and purpose. "Very well, then. Prove it." Her tone was mocking, but there was no malice in it, just a deep, almost playful amusement. The Blade of the Eldari gleamed in the dim light of the ruined city, its hilt adorned with symbols that pulsed with an ancient energy. Elias approached the pedestal, his heart pounding in his chest. The legends had spoken of the sword's power, of its ability to grant godlike strength to those worthy enough to wield it. But the cost of failure was steep. None who had tried had ever returned. He wrapped his hand around the hilt, feeling the electric buzz of energy surge through his fingers. The sword resisted his pull, as if testing him. He gritted his teeth, summoning every ounce of strength, but the blade did not budge. The challenge was real, and yet Elias did not relent. With each attempt, His body grew more tired, but his resolve remained as strong as ever. Kiera watched him, a bemused smile on her face. "It is as I said," she murmured. "The sword will not yield to your kind. The Eldari created it to protect us from those who sought to wield its power. You cannot." But before she could finish her sentence, there was a sudden shift in the air. Elias gritted his teeth, his fingers turning white as they clenched tighter around the hilt. His body surged with energy, and with a final, desperate pull, the sword came free from its pedestal. The force of it sent him stumbling backward, but he caught himself, holding the sword aloft in triumph. Kiera's face, which had been full of amusement, faltered. Her eyes widened with disbelief, her mouth parting slightly as she looked at Elias, now holding the blade of the Eldari in his hands. The sword pulsed with a brilliant light, its power radiating outward, filling the ruins with a crackling energy that echoed throughout the desolate city. Elias stood there, staring at the sword in his hands, a moment of awe passing over him. He had done it. He had succeeded where so many before him had failed. Kiera's expression shifted from shock to something else, a mix of admiration and quiet wonder. She stepped forward, her steps slow and deliberate, her gaze never leaving the sword. I did not expect this," she said softly. "You were right. You are different." Elias met her gaze, his breath steady. "I told you. I'm not like the others." Kiera reached out, her fingers grazing the edge of the sword. For a brief moment, there was a silent connection between them, an understanding that passed beyond words. Then, she smiled, this time with no mockery, but with a quiet respect. "You have proven yourself human," she said, her voice reverberating with an ancient power. "The sword has chosen you. You are worthy." Elias felt the weight of the sword in his hands, a heavy responsibility that now seemed to stretch before him. He had won the challenge, but the journey was far from over. The sword's power came with a cost, a burden that no one could truly prepare for. Kiera's smile softened. "The blade of the Eldari does not choose lightly, but it has seen your heart. It knows your resolve. What will you do now?" Elias looked at the sword, feeling its power coursing through him. He could feel the potential for greatness, for destruction, for creation. But as he met Kiera's gaze, he understood the true test had only just begun. The sword was not a prize to be claimed. It was a responsibility to be shouldered. "I will use its power to bring change," Elias said, his voice steady. "To make the galaxy a better place." Kiera nodded slowly, her gaze filled with a mixture of pride and caution. "You are not alone in this, Elias. The Eldari are gone, but their legacy remains. Be careful. The power you now wield is not just a gift, it is a test." And so, Elias stood at the threshold of his destiny, the blade of the Eldari in his hands, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Kiera, the last of the Eldari, had watched him prove his worth, and now she would help him understand the true weight of the sword he had claimed. The universe would soon know the name of Elias, the human who had done the impossible, and who would carry the legacy of the Eldari into a new age.